Dr Reena here. I'm a dental specialist and founder of RW Perio, located at 75 Harley Street. Welcome to my podcast, Life and Smile, where we talk about everything dental, lifestyle, business, and much more. Every episode, I'm joining conversation with a specialist expert in their chosen field, who give us a behind-the-scenes glimpse into their daily regime, career turning points, and an insider look at what they can't live without. As a businesswoman myself, it's so inspiring to hear how people have built their careers and shattered those glass ceilings. So let's get the conversation going. In season 2, I really wanted to, at some stage, take the conversation back to my roots. As many of you are aware, I have an Indian heritage, but I was born and brought up in London. I love the fact that London is very multicultural and you're constantly surrounded by so much global culture. In this episode, we'll be talking to someone who has very effortlessly combined her culture with her career. She refers to herself as a writer and full-time thinker. She is also the UK editor of the Brown Girl magazine and the contributor to The Asian Today. She is the writer and director of The Evolution of the British Indian Woman, a mini film series. As a guest speaker for the BBC Asian Network and BBC Radio London, she is also known for discussing social issues impacting British South Asians today. This is, of course, Sejal Sehmi. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Reena.
It's so nice to have you on the show and really looking forward to discussing so many interesting topics.
Yeah, me too.
So, as Brown Girl magazine's UK editor, you've been quoted as saying your passion for writing has stemmed from challenging society-defined rules created for women of my generation. Tell us more about sort of how your role started with Brown Girl magazine and how you feel the industry has sort of evolved from the time you started with Brown Girl magazine.
So it's quite interesting that you picked that statement out, because I remember putting that statement down on my website 10 years ago. And I remember thinking it was quite a bold statement. And Brown Girl magazine really happened to me purely by accident. So Brown Girl magazine, for those who don't know what it is, it's an online publication that was founded in 2008 by two young girls who wanted to give the South Asian diaspora a voice in the US. Fast forward to 2022, I would describe it as a global storytelling platform that combines these voices because it enables South Asian men and women to create their own narratives through stories of culture, identity, food, relationship, politics, particularly for those Gen X first born in their respective countries where there's lots of cross-cultural conflicts, as probably you have seen and I have seen. Correct, being the firstborn raised here. And at the time, 10 years ago, I hadn't heard of Brown Girl magazine. And just to give you some context into how it fell into my lap, more or less, I come from a mixed heritage background. So my father is Punjabi and my mum is Gujarati. And in that era, in the 70s, it was quite a big deal. It was kind of often unheard of. However, I feel that my younger sisters and I have been raised with the best of both worlds. And I do feel like we've had quite a liberated upbringing, because we've always been encouraged to follow our dreams, be quite independent, financially stable. I don't live with my family, but I live, close enough to them. So there's always been that fine balance there. And whilst I'm quite appreciative of the fact that I have seen other girls of my age come from maybe stricter backgrounds where they couldn't really leave home, they had to be married by a certain time and pursue a certain career. I don't think I had that direct pressure. Now, as a young girl, my head was always in a book. I loved reading, I loved writing. I had a tutor for GCSE English when we were studying Macbeth, and he said to my mum, she does not need tuition, she's just writing essays for the fun of it. Wow. Because I was just so engrossed. That's how much I loved it. However, when it came to doing my A-levels and then on to university, the problem was that not only was I the firstborn child, but I was also the oldest grandchild of the entire family. So there's this kind of silent pressure, indirect pressure, if you like, to really pursue something that is deemed to be, and I say this inverted quotes, more academically stable. And you
Yep.
know what I mean, either
Yep.
medicine, accountancy,
Yeah.
business,
Yeah.
technology. And there, I didn't really have any other avenues because it's not as widespread as it is now. It's not, things aren't, and courses aren't as accessible as they, during that time.
Yeah.
So by default, I just thought, fine, I'll just stick to business and technology. I was good at it. I did it. I enjoyed university, and I fell into financial services, and I made a career out of it, and I was quite happy. And growing up, I grew up in a very mixed environment, South Asian communities, Black communities, very, very mixed. And whilst there was never really any direct pressure from my parents about marriage and so forth, I've always been very private about my personal relationships. I just don't put it out there, and unless it's going somewhere, I just don't like to make a big deal out of things. And I've never really been questioned too much. But you start to see your friend circles around you get married and have children. And in the back of your mind, you just think you'll follow the same pattern at some point until you start getting a bit older, having your own thoughts, having your own dreams, own ambitions. And it's somehow that indirect pressure from the society around you, it's that suddenly started to make me question my self-worth. Well, hold up a minute, you're hitting 30. Why aren't you married? Why don't you have children? And all of a sudden, the once confident 20-something-year-old, I became really, really insecure to the extent where it impacted my mental health massively. And for a good part of my 30s, I suffered from body dysmorphia issues. And it was only through my recovery process when I started to really unravel the different, peel the different layers of the onion, where actually it was everybody else's failing to understand why I chose to lead a different life, and their insecurity that they were pushing on me, as opposed to kind of it being my issue, that I started to really question these pressures or these expectations, particularly South Asian communities and maybe other ethnic minority communities, placed particularly on women. If you don't if you don't settle down by a certain age, and again, the word settling down makes me very, agitated.
Yes.
You're left on the shelf. Again, it's such a dated use, and also, following certain custom. And I looked around me, and it was like things like feeding the men first as if they were children, waiting on them hand and foot. So all of a sudden, I'm suddenly questioning these. And at the same time, whilst my family were happy that I was recovering, there was all this conflict there about stop causing arguments, stop questioning everything, particularly during a family wedding. And I was like, no, there's got to be more to life than this. There's more to my identity than this. So it just so happened, by chance, 10 years ago, I lost my job, and it was right bang in the middle of my sister's wedding, which was great. We had a great time. But again, there were lots of family around me, like, oh, what's going on with you? And I was like, well, I just need to find a job. I'll find a rich man and everything will be fine, because, life is just that kind. And I think I was so overwhelmed, by the enormity of it all, that one night after my sister's wedding, a good filmmaker friend and we happened to go out with a group of friends. After a good couple of bottles of wine, he turned around and he said to me, I've got an idea. Let's do a pitch on Indiegogo and document your journey in India to challenge these stereotypes. So all of these things that we're challenging here in the UK, what's actually happening in India? Are women of your generation, working women, are they getting the same pressure? What do they think about relationships, live-in relationships, marriage, and so forth? And the next day, fiercely hungover, he called me up and he said, we're doing this, yes. And I recorded an Indiegogo promo on my iPhone 4, I think it was at the time. Used my redundancy money, and within a couple of weeks I was out in India, camera in hand.
Incredible.
It was, and I met the most incredible people. It really opened up my mind, because I felt so empowered by these women who had created their own businesses, some who have come out of unhappy marriages, who had been forced to marriage who had been raped in their marriages, people who decided to come on camera to say, I don't care if my family have shunned me, I'm happy doing this. University professors, marriage counsellors, marriage bureaus. I went on blind dates, the lot, and it just opened up my mind that we are so worried about clinging on to something for a sense of belonging. We're actually where our roots are, where our Indian roots are, the women there of our generation are miles ahead. So during that time, before I flew out, my friend had given me a book and she said, just blog whatever you want, whatever you were thinking about. So I said, all right. I stayed back in India for a while. So unfortunately, the film kind of like never took off because people didn't really have confidence in it. They said it was too controversial at the time. There was no such thing as Instagram Reels or anything to really promote it. But I was approached by Asiana magazine, who had given me my first break, and they documented my journey through a little mini series. And then I happened to come across Brown Girl magazine on Twitter.
Right.
So we kind of went back and forth on Twitter, and I started sending a few things, and I read up about them, and I was like, oh my God, why have I not heard of this? Why do we not have something like this here in the UK? And if we do, which we do have some really strong publications here in the UK, but at that time I wasn't aware of it. So I kept contributing more, kept going back, kept contributing more. I got back into full-time work when I came back to England, and I was quite fortunate that my job took me to New York quite a lot, and I became friends with the chief editor, at which point I'd said to her, right, cards on the table, we need to have a dedicated UK team, because I feel our voices are different, not better, not worse, they're just different. Our heritage is different. Our forefathers came to the UK from other countries much earlier than, say, people in the US had done. It's been 50 years this year since Asians in Uganda were expelled and were forced to come to the UK. And also in America, there's little bubbles everywhere where we literally live, our whole country is a bubble.
It's a bubble, yeah.
And our journeys are very different. Our sense of humor is different. Our music is different. Our literature is different. We've got a bit of a dry sense of humor. So she said, go for it. It's all yours. And she gave me full reign. So I came back after that trip, I think 2015, 2016, I came back and I opened up applications and said, looking for UK writers, absolutely overwhelmed by the responses. And I took it from there, and I've since, I suppose, focused on really creating a UK brand, if you like. And we have been involved in events such as the UK's first Asian Women Festival in Birmingham that happened just before lockdown. We've also been part of King's College TEDx UCL Women Exhibition, where we were able to display some of our strong stories. So in answer to your question, I suppose, as to how it has evolved, I think it's always evolving, because it started off with me wanting to tell this US publication that I've got a story to tell I'm from the UK, to now having a dedicated UK brand saying, here we are here to actually help other UK diaspora voices create their narratives and their stories. And I think it's not just evolving as an editor or as a writer, but it's also evolving within myself as a South Asian woman and as a British woman, because the writers that I now have, they come from such diverse backgrounds that I didn't even know existed. We have an Indo-Caribbean writer. I had no idea how huge the Indo-Caribbean community here was in the UK. We have girls of other mixed heritage, half Bangladeshi, half Gujarati. I've recently onboarded somebody whose parents come from Chennai, and she said to me, where are the South Indian voices? And I was like, here you go, fill your boots. So I think it's an extremely exciting time. And I feel like I'm evolving as, like I said, as a woman. I started off in my early 30s and now I'm in my 40s with Brown Girl. And they are teaching me. I look at this level of writing and the maturity, and I think to myself, God, if I could rewind back to when I was 20s and I had somebody like that telling me something. And I feel that now we've got the opportunity so that somebody like Sage doesn't have those thoughts before they start questioning themselves and their identity, their self-worth. Hopefully we are giving something, a platform for people to say, you are more than just somebody's daughter and sister. You know, you are your own woman or man or however you choose to identify with. So
Wow.
that's how it's kind of
What a story.
That's
incredible.
I told you it would be a bit of an interesting backdrop.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to see, as you said, your personal evolution through that journey, and then also the evolution of the Brown Girl magazine, all kind of coinciding. I think it's amazing that now that we've got things like social media, you've given so many people, and it's limitless, right? It's across the globe, so many people a voice where, as you said beforehand, they would be stuck in themselves and also questioning themselves, and that having such a negative impact. So I think that power of social media is great.
Absolutely.
You're giving that mic to someone and amplifing that message.
Absolutely.
In terms of, I mean, on that note with social media, do you feel that's been a great positive for us to spread the word, and or do you think there are negatives to it, or what's your kind of thoughts on that?
I mean, it's a bit of both, right? We wouldn't have Brown Girl magazine wouldn't have got to the extent of where it has been if it hadn't been for social media. I'm so thankful for it. So thankful for it. As you say, we've reached out to a global audiences and we educate ourselves about what's going on the other side. So, for example, and we're able to also make change as well, I think. And I think that's quite important. So there were a couple of instances where I think I've had to, it's been a massive learning curve for me because, like I said, I only joined Twitter and all of that like in my 30s. So initially when I had written my first blog, before I flew out to India, my filmmaker friend had said, right, why don't you do an intro blog? And it basically was something along the lines of 30s and not married, and now I'm off to India. And it was very kind of tongue-in-cheek. That's always been like my style. And it got picked up by the BBC Asian Network. And I was interviewed by Nihal, and I was like girl crushing at the time, and I was like, oh my god, Nihal wants to interview me, and I got all dolled up to go into the BBC studios. In that time between traveling and getting to the studios, and I turned my phone on, the amount of disgusting tweets that had gone, I literally had broken down, and I just thought, no, I don't want to go in this interview. And my friend was like, switch your phone off, you know, do the interview and then come out. So I came out of the interview, and whoever this troll was had been listening to me, and it was rape threats. And he said, you're so ugly, that's why nobody wants to marry you anyway. And I thought to myself, I don't want to do this. And my mum had said to me, well, what are you going to do when you go to India? You know, you want to document your journey. It's going to be out there in the public domain. You have to kind of learn to manage your emotion. And I think the policing around, or the controls around it is a lot stronger now. But I think it's so powerful because the impact that it can have, both negative and positive. So the change that it's been is when I had I was commissioned by The Independent a few years ago because I pitched a piece about R. Kelly and Michael Jackson and those documentaries and the allegations around them at the time. This is before R. Kelly had been sentenced. So, and I knew how sensitive it would be. Now, I was a Michael Jackson fan since day one. So this is a really hard piece for me to write because I was challenging basically my own opinion of him, and why I felt as an editor myself, I had to take some form of responsibility about when I'm accepting stories about abuse, you know, we all accusing them of all being liars, and how I kind of look at things differently with a more mature attitude. And again, I got a lot of hate from there. But this time around, there are controls in place where I can block them, report them. But also I had to remember it's an opinion piece. If I'm I was commissioned for my opinion. But there's been positive changes as well. I did a piece that went viral for Brown Girl, where this fashion designer, British fashion designer, had made swimwear with Hindu deities in not so much respectful parts of the body area, and caused outrage within Indian communities. There was a lot of sensitivity around it, as you would find when it comes to any form of religion. So there was a lot of outrage. She got a lot of hate. So I decided to write an open letter to her. So I did an article. But the way in which I tried to word it was that, can you understand, to this designer, I asked her, do you understand why this outrage is happening? This is the background of it. This is how people feel. And whilst I appreciate you are trying to embrace our culture in your way, maybe you need to be a little bit more culturally sensitive, and kind of worded it that way. It went completely viral. I got contacted by various BBC local radio stations, and they got her, the designer, on board and me to try and talk. And then last minute she pulled out. So I had to respect the decision. I said, I'll still go ahead and talk about it. And she decided to issue an apology, and she took the design down, and she said, I didn't mean to cause any offence. So we republished her apology at the top of the article to kind of prove that, you can make positive change. So whilst there was a lot of praise and thanks for, being culturally sensitive and understanding, equally, I did get threats to say, well, what happened to freedom of speech? So you kind of have to, the more you do it, I suppose you kind of learn to pick your battles, because ultimately it's there for everyone and anyone.
Yeah, it amplifies the not so good stuff as well, I guess.
Yeah.
I find that with anything. I think if you're putting your head above the parapet, you're going to get hate. If you're, I read a quote where if you're on the field, right, people are going to be booing, but at least you're trying to play the game rather than just sitting in the audience. So I think, from my experience as well, I think you learn to be able to take hate. And I think if you're not, unless you're trying hard enough, you're not trying hard enough if you're not getting hate, I think they say. So I think it's you learn to deal with it, I guess. But yeah, I know a lot of people, when they're writing articles, say they don't read the comment section, like they just publish it, and it's like, I don't care what anyone says. It's, as you said, it's an opinion piece, and then they just switch everything off. But it's hard to do that. But I think there's an element.
It's hard to do that, but I think, so at least with Brown Girl magazine, I feel like I do my utmost best to protect my writers. I feel that's my responsibility. If I felt that they were pitching something that was going to cause some form of offence, I would say no. We've had guest contributors. We've also had opinion pieces. It's my responsibility to make sure to say, this is an opinion piece. This may not always reflect what the magazine as a whole thinks. At the same time, sometimes, and this is something I've learned from an editorial perspective, is that when you sometimes do have to sift through the comments, because when you start to kind of have a look at their profiles, especially on Twitter, the Michael Jackson, R. Kelly one is a great example, because for a lot of the disgusting messages I was getting when I looked at their accounts, these were dedicated either R. Kelly, Michael Jackson accounts. So they're hiding behind these profiles. And once you report one and shut them down, they'll just come back. So am I going to pay attention to it? No, I'm not going to pay attention to it. But I think there are instances where there have been debates.
Sure.
And it's not just been from a writing perspective. I was on Ankur Desai from BBC. I was on his show end of last year to talk about the term BAME. Is it dated, right? And I put my hands up and I said, I have used it in a lazy manner. And I now look back and think, I shouldn't be using it. Actually, I need to take ownership and accountability, because what I'm doing is placing Blacks, Asians and different ethnic minority groups in one category. And I think I felt the responsibility more during COVID, because I lost quite a few people that I loved during COVID. And I did a lot of research into it. Why are Asians being impacted? Why are Blacks being impacted? And I read the studies, and they just, the ethnic minority groups are just listed in the government statistics in one block. And I'm like, but who are these ethnic minority? How can we start to change? How can we start to identify what we can do different, or what the issue is, if you're not going to be specific? And it's not fair, because just like I've got my own identity, so do all of these other ethnic minority groups. We're so diverse now. Our country is so diverse. So it was a great conversation I had. There were a few other guests on the panel. And so once it was out, I shared the link out on Twitter. And it started a conversation with some girls in the US. And one person had said to me, "What's BAME?" So I explained the terminology, and she said, "Oh, in the US we call it BIPOC." And I said, "What's BIPOC?" I didn't know. And then she said, "It's Black Indigenous People of Color." So similar term. So I turned around and I said, "Oh, that's interesting. In the US, do you feel, as a South Asian woman, there are similar conversations being had? Do you feel people get offended?" And she said, "No, why would they?" She said, "My parents didn't come here, didn't escape their country because of slavery." I, I looked at that comment with a bit of a blank mind, thinking, no, just no, what is it? And our parents did. It didn't make any sense to me, but it got me thinking, like how different our voices are and what people are thinking on the other side of the world. So I think you kind of almost like, I suppose, have to pick and choose. You know what the hate is, you know what the nonsense is, but then you also sometimes know what the healthy debate is. And sometimes those healthy debates
Sure.
can make you look at things with a different perspective.
Completely.
Which isn't always easy to do.
Yeah, no, for sure. So tell us more about Desi Read. So I believe you were the co-founder. So how did that all start off? What an amazing platform that is.
So my friend and I, Anjali Chadda, who is a writer, actress, and theatre producer as well, we've always been book geeks. So I covered one of her plays, Dadism, and that's how we met. So I covered it for the Asian Today, and we kept in touch. And there was always something that we wanted to do around books. And she said to me, "Why is it that we don't hear about these hidden gems from South Asian writers, like in Waterstones or necessarily on an Amazon?" So sometimes I would find something on Twitter, and I was like, "What, have you heard about this?" Or she'll find something on Instagram. So what we wanted to do was create a platform for people who have an interest in South Asian writers, for those little gems that you can't find on the shelf in a Waterstones anywhere. That's not going to get advertised, in a W.H. Smith. And we started out by reaching out to writers like Wasim Khan, for example. He was our first writer who we had interviewed. He kindly took us out for dinner, gave us a copy of his book, and he had written this brilliant detective series with the help of an elephant. So a lot of Indians would perceive that as the Lord Ganesh,
Yes.
well-known Hindu deity.
Yeah.
Although he didn't refer to him as Lord Ganesh, he just said, "My friend, the elephant."
Right.
And it was based in Mumbai, in the slums in Mumbai. And his series was based on Wasim's actual time when he lived in Mumbai. And what he wanted to do was create his version of what he experienced of the slums in Mumbai, as opposed to what we see in mainstream cinema. In Bollywood, it's not all Slumdog Millionaire dancing happy. It's not like that at all. And that's kind of, it was like a light-hearted series, but also looking at the world through his eyes as well, as opposed to rose-tinted glasses, which I thought was pretty genius. And there were other books as well, so Switch Bhattacharya, Table Manners, short stories of women in different parts of India, which is quite powerful. Raj Kaur, Superheroes of South Asian Girls, a first of its kind. And it did so well that, Penguin picked up on it, and she was in partnership with Penguin. So although I haven't been as heavily involved with Desi Reads over the past couple of years, it's still going quite strong. And I think it's a much needed platform, I think, to fill in that missing gap for these writers that we never really hear about, like I said, in a mainstream bookstore.
It must be quite nice with all your kind of roles to date. You get to connect with so many inspirational individuals with all their unique stories. And I mean, how do you find that? Do you enjoy learning more about? You probably learn from them as well? Is that what kind of drives you in terms of
I think I've always had such an inquisitive mind. Like even now, we have a family wedding going on at the moment, and it's your typical big fat Indian wedding. I've always been very vocal, especially now at my age, about what I feel about certain rituals and so forth. But it's a family wedding. I'm not going to cause any drama. So I asked my mum about a couple of things, and she just gave me that Indian mum look, like, "Don't you start, girl." And I was like, "No, I genuinely want to know. Like, I'm interested, the meaning behind it." So I think I've always been like that as a person. I'm always intrigued. And I feel like, especially in India, India really gave me the confidence that I needed to go out there and speak to people and talk to people, having the camera in my hand, being in front of I never like being in front of a camera, so being on screen and talking to people, that helped massively. And I think, there was something that a couple of friends had said to me when I first started writing, was that whilst I was very vocal in my writing about how I felt around certain societal pressures that are placed on an Indian woman, their comments, their feedback was like, yes, it's great. And what? What's so different about what you're saying than what all these other women are saying? The difference is you've posted it on a blog spot. What are you doing differently?
Right.
And I think meeting different people from these different experiences has helped me to be a little bit more, I suppose, less biased, and be a bit more open-minded and challenge my own thoughts as well. I think, and also I think hopefully be a little bit more empathetic.
For sure.
Be a bit more empathetic, that it's not just they're horrible, they're strict, they've got no emotion, but it's about there is a reason why people feel a certain way, or why there are certain traditions and customs that are naturally just ingrained within us. And I think that's networking with different people, especially people who have written books as well. I love going to book launches. I love it when they send me a copy of their book. I mean, normally it's the team that do the review and read it, but I'm very much like pass it on afterwards. And I love meeting the authors and talking to them, because I just think I want to know, like, what's the story behind it? What motivated you?
Story behind the story.
Exactly, that's what it is. And I think, and I'm empowered by that, and I like to think that that's helped me become a little bit more, like I said, a bit more of an empathetic person as well.
Yeah, no, for sure. And you're a great writer yourself.
Thank you.
It's so talented. And I guess, before the podcast, we were just chatting and you mentioned this isn't even your full-time job. So I thought you were doing this full-time, which is amazing. How do you fit everything in? And how do you, do you go home and then work on all these other bits? How does it all work?
It's definitely been a challenge, for sure. I think that, when I had come back from India and the whole filmmaking thing, we were trying for months to get it out there, get somebody to pick it up. And the problem is, you see, the nature of the documentary, talking about how people find a partner, the conventional methods versus the non-conventional methods, it's almost now dated, because now we have Hinge, Tinder, Bumble, all of that has kind of taken over. But what came from it was amazing experiences. So I was thankful that at least when I come back from India, the writing opportunities came. What happened was I started to look for places where maybe I could do like freelancing, but because print almost is kind of non-existent because everybody's going online, nobody's really paying for contributors anymore. I think there's only a few publications that have paid me to to give them a guest contribution. Otherwise, it's just, we just value your input and that's it. And I've spent such a long time in financial services, become touchwood financially independent. So I was a little bit torn. Well, my passion really isn't, the fight for my passion isn't really going to pay my bills. And I didn't want to end up hating my passion because I couldn't make it a full-time job. And with Brown Girl magazine, it wasn't so difficult to manage from a long-term perspective, because everybody who works for Brown Girl magazine, they all do it voluntarily. So a lot of them are university students or they're working full-time, but a lot of them are doing writing full-time for their day jobs as well. That's probably the difference, but I'm not doing writing full-time. So I try where possible to try and keep a few days a week free for kind of like Brown Girl, catch up on the weekends. We use like Slack, so we're always available.
Right.
Having the meetings face to face with the girls here in the UK when I can has helped. I think when you when you love something, when you're so passionate about something, as you are doing right now with the podcast after your day job,
Thank
I
you.
think you just do it without thinking how
You
much
enjoy
time
it.
it's
It's
taking.
it's almost
Exactly.
like downtime for you, I guess. It's
Absolutely,
time
yeah.
to switch off and
Yeah. It's
do what you
me
love.
time.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
That's what it is. Yeah.
Do you have any like writing rituals or anything that you do? Is it, do you have to sit in a certain area where you're writing? Do you have a
Very
favorite spot?
So I still very much have pen and paper. I still,
Mhm.
not as much at the moment, but definitely during COVID, I did used to just write things in my book, even if it was things I wasn't really publishing, just anything. Because there are times when I look back at it. I did this masterclass at the Guardian newspaper with a great writer, Tim Lott, and he gave me some good advice. And he said, you know, everybody's about pen and paper, but he said, now with the phone, you can do like voice notes or write notes in there. So actually today I had a thought about a new article. So what I tend to do is I like come out the shower, like quickly do a voice note. Remember this line came to me. But the time to write comes at different times.
Mhm.
And for me, it's so weird because there have been times where suddenly in the middle of the night, I can't sleep. And I was like, oh my God, this is in my head. I need to write and put it together. And I tell the other writers, like, you know, keep half an hour or something every day if you can. What I do is make a habit of reading other people's work.
Right.
I always read and try and get inspired from it to try and keep an open mind so that I don't get boxed in just my version of a piece. You know, look at what else is out there and other styles of writing as well, like how does it flow. And I make it a practice to get somebody else to read my piece before I publish. The past 2 years I've kind of been more focused on the editorial side because we have been so busy, so my own writing has taken a step back. I am trying to slowly
Yeah.
get into it.
Do you have a set group of people that you send your work to when you want them to read it? Or
There are generally, a
yeah,
couple of people that
yeah,
I
that
do
you
send it
trust.
to,
Yeah.
who will give me an honest opinion. There is one friend in particular who will literally, like, no, a couple of things out, like, no,
You
I'm
need
bored
people like
already.
that, I think, in your
Yeah,
life
I
to
do,
give you
definitely.
honest
Yeah.
advice, and make you better. And you mentioned, so reading other people's work, understanding their narrative, their worldview inspires you.
Yeah.
What else inspires you? Because you're so driven. I mean, as you said, you balance everything. Yes, you enjoy it, but is there like a writer that you follow and that inspires you? Do you have a mentor? Are there certain books that you read, or what is it? Or is it just that you want to spread this message and you want to give us South Asians a voice to actually, you know, put the message out and challenge the current thinking?
I think, I mean, I have lots of people that I do look up to from the writing perspective. You know, I'm very motivated by my chief editor, Trisha. I love this initiative at Brown Girl that she's brought together. I love the fact that she's just given me free reign to do what I want to do. I'm always empowered by and inspired by my writers. I think that, as I mentioned before, some of the stories that they write about, one of the girls, Simran, had written this really powerful story about how South Asian girls aren't going for smear tests. And that's why cancer is diagnosed so later on. Because, I mean, generally, people who are sexually active get smear tests, but it's not always the case.
Yeah.
But, you know, if you have caught something, you're afraid to have that conversation with your parents that you've been sexually active. And it was a really interesting piece. And I think, oh my God, I never thought that when I was young. So I'm quite inspired by it. I do take a lot of inspiration from the women in my family because my relationship with my mum, I think, only got better after I started recovering. I think we had a very volatile relationship for a while because although she's always encouraged me, she's extremely independent. She's an entrepreneur, she's a businesswoman, she's juggling. So I felt quite intimidated. I feel like sometimes I used to feel like I can't meet up to her expectation. You know, she was the one that pushed me to move out, buy my own place, you know, just reach for the stars. But there was somewhere along the line where I felt like reach for the stars, but you're almost conditionalized. Okay. Okay, you've done this, but now what about marriage? And I'm like, hold up a minute. But all this time you were saying, yeah, but if you find a rich man, it's okay. So it started contradictory. And I felt like she was being not directly pressured, but because she could see all of her other friends' daughters all getting married and stuff. And they'll be like, don't worry, Sage's time will come soon. You know, that head bop, that pity bop, like, oh, don't worry. There's no need. It never phased me, but I could see it started to phase her. And somewhere along the line, there used to be kind of cracks. And because I was the oldest, and I'd sometimes taken steps that had not always been expected of me, dating somebody that wasn't Indian, like, I didn't think twice about it. But for some reason, it was at that time like a big deal. Like, how could you? And I'm like, why would I not? I don't get it. But you married somebody who's not Gujarati, so how is that, you know? And she has her direct family here, so there all is like different pressures. And I've always had a close relationship, but it was a catch-22, and that started impacting me more and more and more. And at my worst, and I remember finally having the courage to tell her that this is the situation I am getting help. And she said to me, I'm not stupid. What can I do to help you? And it was literally all I needed to hear. The people that I was expecting to get the support from, I didn't. And it used to break me. And my mum was like, well, I'm here. What else do you need? And when I did live with her at that point, she used to help me with meals. How about this? How about that? Or if I had days where I was like, I don't want to eat this, I don't want that. Do you want a glass of milk? When I did have dairy, do you want this? Do you want that? And I was so thankful. So when I told her that I want to do this, I want to go to India, and she said, I'm nervous for you, but she said, if you feel this is what you need to do, go for it. So when I came back, I'm very close to her mother, my maternal grandmother, who we call Ba in Gujarati. Maternal grandmother is called Ba. Now, my grandmother, she was widowed very young. My grandfather died, like, I think early, mid-80s he died. We were all quite young. And she single-handedly raised all of us. And she was the one that pushed not just my mum, but also all of her daughters, her daughter-in-laws. You guys go out and work. I will look after all of your children. As long as you guys are all financially independent, do not lean on a man. Because she never had education as an option for her. So we've always been very close, my sisters and I, so close to her. And I was approached by this local charity who I used to be vice chair of afterwards. They're called Global Arts Kingston. So what they do is they bring together local communities of the Kingston borough, and through arts programs, like there's carnival, we did like World War One poems, discussions, films, different, and with children. So we kind of bring all people together for their well-being. So I was vice chair for a while, but before I joined them, they had approached me, and I was just about to start my job kind of a month down the line. And they said, look, we've seen your writing journey, like what you've done in India and so forth. We have a storytelling festival coming up about Kingston heritage, because there's so many diverse communities in Kingston upon Thames. Would you like to take part? So I was baffled, because I said, well, my journey's all been in India. What am I going to write to? What am I going to do here? And my friend Wendy, who was a trustee of Global Arts at the time, and she said, you've got the perfect inspiration around you. Look at the women around you. So that's when they commissioned me to write and direct this film called The Evolution of the British Indian Women. And so it was a documentary, and I got my grandmother behind the camera. To this day, I don't know how she did it. I got her and I filmed her. So we filmed her non-stop for a week, and my mum, everyday life. And we got her to narrate her whole story. And it was literally after filming and editing that, and when I was putting the subtitles together, there were times when I used to cry and think, you're so resilient. How did you do that? You went from country to country with 7 children, having to start all over again. Then you lost your husband. You don't speak, well, she understands a bit of English. You independently raised all of us, encouraged all of us, and you've never complained. Her whole life has just been ensuring that we are happy and we get the best. And I think at that point, I was just like, that's who has driven me. I think that's where I get it from.
Yeah.
And I look at my mum as well, because my grandfather encouraged my mum, but then my mum had to come here and all the family came over, so she didn't really get to pursue what she wanted to pursue just because of circumstances. But she was driven to be an entrepreneur. It's like, this is what I want to do. I'm driven and nothing's going to stop me, because my grandmother never wants us to be in that situation that she was ever in.
Yeah.
She said, had I been given access to education, I would have grabbed it with both hands and flown. She said, you guys have it at your fingertips. Just do something amazing with it, fly with it. And I think that for me really is an inspiration. I got my mum, I to this day, I have so much respect for her. The BBC contacted me a couple of years ago about, do I want to talk about, eating disorders, because I'd written some articles about it. So I said, how did you deal with it in your family? And I said, well, why don't you ask my mum? She was the one that helped me. And they invited mother-daughter to come into the BBC and talk about how she felt about it, and how her way of thinking has changed. And she's had to learn with the times, even though she's kind of quite modern like herself, how she kind of fell to like pressure, but she still wants her child's happiness. I don't know many people that would do that. So I think for me, that really drives me. And my sisters, I have, we're very close. I love my sisters. We're kind of like in each other's pockets, and they really drive me. And like I said, I've got my mum's sister-in-laws, we're all very close. So I think having such a strong female network around you and adjusting to how you are thinking, and accepting that things are different now, roll with the times. It empowers me to want to do more, so that I don't want to have to hear about another 30-year-old woman who's sticking her fingers down her throat because she feels she's not good enough because society told her to. And so for that, I think those women in my family are definitely my biggest inspiration.
Yeah. I mean, I completely agree. You learn so much, especially from your grandparents, I think.
Absolutely.
And often I found that unless you actually ask them their story, they don't often offer it. They don't want you to feel bad for what they've been through. And when you do talk to them, I remember talking to my grandma and my granddad, actually, what they went through to get us to where we are. It's so inspirational.
You're right. And I think it's ingrained in South Asian women in particular, not to complain.
Yeah, exactly.
You do it.
Exactly.
You're molded to a certain way. And my grandmother had said to me at the time, and we had managed to dig up old photographs, and there wasn't very many from the village, right? So we managed to find a couple, kind of retouch it up a bit and use it as part of the presentation. And my grandmother had said to me, nobody's ever asked me my story before. She said, you're the only one that's ever asked me. And so we put it up on this big screen. We had subtitles. It's on YouTube. It's on Instagram. And I've had people say to me, wow, your grandmother's so inspiring. And I'm so thankful that I did it then, because unfortunately she has Alzheimer's now. She has absolutely no recollection of her filming it. So sometimes I play it back to her and she said, when did I do that? I don't remember doing that.
Yeah.
Why would I say that to the world? And I said, because you're brave and it needed to be told. And I said, I've always said to her, think about all the other women of your age who never got the opportunity to speak up, because from a young age they were taught, you don't complain, you just do, because you are here on this earth to serve others. That is your moral duty. And they don't know any better. So you can't even blame them.
Yeah,
they just don't know any better.
Yeah. But they've done so well. I remember my grandma, she was, from not being able to speak any English, before she passed away, she could write in, fluently in English.
Amazing.
She was on her iPad, and I was like, wow, that is like super inspirational to learn all those new skills in a country where a complete stranger initially, and then to build a family, a successful family with her kids, etc. It's what they've done. I think I think will always live on in history.
And it's
a unique time. Yeah.
I think what the biggest lesson to learn, really, I suppose, is the resilience from that generation. Because, okay, we're never going to go through, touch wood, what they went through. And I didn't get this job interview once, and I cried to my grandmother, and she said, what's wrong? I said, I didn't get this job. And she said, do you know what? When I moved to this village, I'd lost everything and had 7 children. And I love her for trying to make me feel better.
Yeah.
But I couldn't relate.
Yeah.
Because she had worked so hard, my mum had worked so hard to make sure that we never get to that extent anyway. But it was that resilience, because I just don't think that we are built to be able to tolerate or put up or fight with something like that. But that's thanks to them.
But in a unique way, we're still using that resilience, but for a different scenario.
Absolutely.
So, and my mum always says to me, you know, we worked hard more physically, but you're still working hard.
Yeah.
There's other things that we do. So I think
Yeah.
you learn those values and then use them and adapt them,
Absolutely.
which I think is great. Wow, what a story. So I could talk to you forever.
So it's got a bit deep there, didn't it?
I want to ask you one more thing, actually, before we close.
Absolutely, yeah.
You've kind of touched on it already, but sort of from your journey so far, in terms of any challenges or failures that you faced, I mean, I have to say, by the way, that the mini video series sounds incredible.
It's on my YouTube.
Right.
Yeah,
okay. So definitely check that out. I mean, there must have been challenges during that time as well when you were creating that whole massive project. But in general, what would be your biggest challenge? And also for someone who is just starting up, obviously the landscape is completely different now. But what would you say to your younger self, like if you were doing it all over again?
You know, it's very difficult, because I was born in an era where I suppose we were almost like the guinea pigs, and I don't mean that in a horrible way, but it's, you know, there's no right or wrong way of doing something. People like my parents, although they're both very well educated, quite, you know, independent, not really lived with their families before, it's an experiment. How do we retain our culture and still give them the best of both worlds and not make them feel alienated? And I know that was definitely the case for my parents, especially because I also came from two different heritages. So that in itself was a challenge as well. So I think when I had initially started, because I had started my passion for writing, the opportunities came a lot later on in life. What I used to talk about on the public domain did not go down too well at all with a lot of people in my family. There was a lot of hurtful comments. There was a lot of taunts around, we don't all put our dirty laundry out there in the public for them to criticize. But equally, I have received some wonderful comments from strangers to say, thank you for sharing this. You know, thank you for sharing your story. This has made me, I'm so glad, like, I'm not the only one. And I suppose I had to think about, within the family, within society, within community, people are going to talk no matter what. People are going to have an opinion no matter what. I can't change that. The only thing I could do was change my reaction to it and not get impacted on it and put my energy towards the positive side of it. So there was that challenge of it as well, because there's an emotional attachment there. It's my passion, and you're bringing my passion down, or you're tearing me apart for wanting to be honest and maybe wanting to help people. And it was also maybe therapeutic for me. I'd found an outlet to speak out, saying I've had all this inbuilt me for so long. I don't want to torture myself anymore. I want to put it out there. And there were fun pieces as well. I did write some comical pieces as well. That challenge was there. I did feel very disheartened when I knew that my film in India wasn't really going to go anywhere. That was quite difficult to accept. I think that what I thought at the time, that wasn't for anybody to blame. I think just at that time, there was so much around the big mainstream channels, again, at that point, wanted us to, and I'm not going to name them, but there were a few channels that had asked me to change the edit in a certain way to have a certain kind of ending for a certain type of audience. And I said, that's not what my documentary is about. There is no happy ever after. What it's meant to do is open up a conversation, right? What else is there behind this? It's about identity. That's what it is. It's about self-worth. That's what this whole journey was about. So, but again, on the flip side of it was somebody had published my work. I never thought I would see my writing on a publication somewhere. Just didn't ever think that would happen. And I think, like as I'd mentioned before, being able to be financially stable and do my passion, I think if I'd been younger, it would have been different. But because I was already established in my career, there'd just been a few gaps because of redundancies. I had a mortgage and stuff to think about. I didn't want to end up hating my passion because it wasn't paying the bills. you see.
Makes sense.
My younger self, you see, what's interesting is when I was at university, and this is a true story, that when we had a careers advisor who used to help us with our CV and where we want to go, the first thing this careers advisor said to me, looked at my CV and said, A, you need to put your date of birth, your gender, and most importantly, you need to put that your nationality is British. And I said, why? He said, because they're going to look at your name and say, future employees may look at your name and say, what if she doesn't speak English very well? Obviously, you cannot get away with that now. That's as far as my careers advice went. There was no other accessible information to what if I wanted to pursue my dream in journalism, in blogging, but in filmmaking or something, some form of literature. So I just kind of went along with it. And I didn't really challenge my parents because I just felt at the time, well, this was the only thing. When I looked around me, well, all my other friends are pursuing these avenues. So clearly that's the right thing to do. My younger self, it's difficult because I think if I was my younger self now, I would probably have a lot more options around me. I don't feel like my parents are really to blame in this. I just think that they didn't know any better. If anything, they're always sharing my work now. And my mum said to me, she says, I wish you really had gone into journalism and this and that. And she said, oh, I feel bad. I said, why do you feel bad? You didn't know, did you? It's just a different world. So I would say to anybody now who wants to pursue it, there are so many opportunities now. There are so many publications that are offering intern places. Maybe university isn't for everybody, and that's okay too. I enjoyed uni because I was just a geek. It was just a chance for me to study, to read, and that's just how I am by nature. And I used to enjoy the debate classes the most, management styles and stuff, and do essays for the sake of it, which was quite sad.
Wow.
But it was an opportunity for me to write. That's what it was. But now I would say that if you do have an interest and if it is your passion, publications like Brown Girl Magazine, we are always looking for guest contributors, always open to new ideas. That's what makes the magazine work. It's stories from other contributors that make Brown Girl Magazine what it is. And there are definitely large publications, British publications that offer intern courses. You've got that The Guardian, and I think Cosmopolitan, don't quote me on this, may do or not. But there are definitely courses available, and Instagram is very powerful as well. Follow other people, watch other podcasts. I think we connected of Instagram.
Yeah.
And I told a friend of mine, she was messaging me, I was like, guess what I'm doing? She was like, this is super cool, super amazing. So, and spread the word, and you never know where it may take you.
Exactly.
The world's your ocean. So
pursue your passion.
Absolutely, yeah.
Especially in the unique time that we're in today. So, Sejal, thank you so much.
Thank you
I
for
could, as I
having
said,
me.
talk to you forever. There's so many interesting stories there in itself, and so much you can learn from your journey so far. And really looking forward to what you do next. So, in terms of for the listeners, I'm sure they want to keep in touch with you. So, tell us where we can stay in tune with everything you're doing.
So Brown Girl Magazine, their website is browngirlmagazine.com. Our Instagram handle is Brown Girl Mag. I also have my own Instagram handle, which is Sejal Sehmi, and I have my own website, sejalsehmi.com. And on there, actually, you'll find some new podcasts that I've recently just finished with a very good friend of mine, Sharon, on her podcast, Too British to be Asian. It's extremely interesting.
Fantastic.
Sharon used to be a writer for us, so I've talked about my mixed heritage background and also about why representation in fashion and beauty is important. So that's all on the website as well.
Amazing. Looking forward to it. We'll see you again soon. Thank
you
so much,
Reena.
for your time.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.